Welcome back to episode 2 of the podcast. In this episode, I will be talking about economic effects of women entering the workforce during World War II and the changes the economy went in this time. I hope I did not bore you in the last episode because of a history lesson, but this is where I think it starts to get interesting. So first, one of the things I want to talk about economically is you might think this is obvious, but I still think it's noteworthy of pointing out, is the demand for women workers during the war peaked, and after the war it fell. For example, an article from the Journal of the Economic History from Cambridge University writes, "The war was associated with a substantial rise in wartime demand and post-war demand for female production workers, relative to the setting in 1941. The overall shift in demand, which is measured as the change in quantity demanded at a specific wage rate, boomed by more than 50 log points between 1941 and the wartime peak in 1944. Then it fell substantially after the war, but it still remained 16 to 23 log points higher than the counterfactual trends from the 1920s. Now, I know that was a lot to take in, but overall, something I take from that quote was that women were very much needed during the war, but not as much after the war due to the fact that men had their jobs back, and not because they were better at it, but because that was their jobs before, and employers, I think, wanted to keep that standard in check. Although there is an upside to this, the demand for women workers in general was increased from way before the war to after the war, but we did see a substantial rise when the war started to a substantial fall after. And I think that's kind of noteworthy of realizing. Something else to add to this is from the journal titled Shocking Labor Supply, a reassessment of the role of World War II on women's labor supply. Claudia Golden and Claudia Olivetti are writing this article, and I think it's really powerful. They hone in on specific jobs that women received at this time and whether they stayed there or not, and one of their main concerns were demands and supply of jobs as well. One quote from the article I really liked was, "Lower educated women were disproportionately pulled into manufacturing positions in 1944, and many probably did not remain because women were often unwelcome in them. The more educated group of women, however, entered sectors that enabled women to stay to 1950 and beyond." Okay, so I think this provides some economic answers as well as some workplace environment answers, which we will get more into in the next episode, but as of right now, everyone in society, your level of education really affects the job that you're able to get. So this is not very surprising, but I think it's noteworthy that women with less education did not want to stay at their jobs because they weren't welcome there, and women with more education did want to stay at their jobs. So I think it's the fact that just because you don't have a college or high school degree that they didn't want to stay there, I think it's personally unfair that they're not feeling confident enough to stay at their jobs. And one more thing that I think is noteworthy of pointing out is the difference in pay, which we still experience nowadays in society, that both men and women were receiving in war times. This is, I think, very important because women today are not even making a full dollar compared to men. Something that stuck out to me was a quote in Mary Anderson's speech, who is the director of the Labor Women's Bureau. Her speech at the Catholic Conference in 1942, something she said that really stuck out to me was, "In one aircraft plant where rate differentials existed along all lines, a woman instructor was found receiving a pay rate far below of that the men she was training." Now, let's think about this. A women instructor was receiving a pay rate much below the men she was training. Let's give it a present day analogy. This is like you're a student at a university taking a course, and you're making your professor's salary while your professor teaches for free. That just sounds, in the nicest way possible, idiotic, which I think this is what that is too. It's kind of enraging for me to realize that instructors of jobs and trainers of jobs were not receiving the same amount of money as trainees. Now, this really sums up the economic effects of wartime women workers. In the next episode, I will be talking about the women perspective and work environments and how it affected women's view on jobs during war. Get excited because we will be hearing an excerpt audio from Mary Anderson's speech recording herself about what work women could do despite how men thought they couldn't. And I'll leave you with that.